necessarily having to say a prayer, but there's actually a book called Aleister Crowley and the Ouija board that was written by J. Edward Cornelius is his name, and he wrote this almost like an essay about the Ouija board. And one thing that I found very interesting about it was when you are using the board for the very first time. I'm talking opening it out of a box, bought out of the store, wherever you're getting it, or if someone makes it for you, it's never been used. I find that if you do some prep planning, which it discusses it very in depth, if you're more into astrology, this gentleman is a little bit more into astrology, and he said you want to make sure that you use it during a sign that's going to be compatible with your own sign, so that you are having kind of almost like an agreement, or it's easier to kind of learn from one another. The thing is that you are having the thing is that they seem to be more like children, like toddlers, when they first come into this realm. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a spirit like a person. It could just be an elemental. I found that I've had multiple different experiences. I've had experiences with loved ones. Without rushing too far ahead, though, because I could talk about this all day long, clearly. But one thing that I found was when he was talking about opening, start using the board, create a sacred space, do some planning ahead of time, prepare yourself for at least maybe a good hour, light some candles, play some gentle music that you're very fond of. It's very similar in fashion to when a mother gives birth to a child. If they're they're trying to create an atmosphere of relaxation so that when this begins, there's nothing negative. And I feel that that's why when someone that doesn't know what they're doing, they're laughing, they're making fun of it. Imagine if, you're a newborn and you come into this world and you are surrounded by a ton of negativity, or you're not being kept or cared for properly, as in proper usage, creating a space. I find that using the board at the same day and time, throughout the day, if you're more of an afternoon person and there's nobody in your house and it's your quiet time, then that's when you should, attempt to using it. If nighttime is best for you or early morning, then that's when I would try it. You want to be able to do something that you're going to learn from as an experience, and you're going to want to, kind of relax, just breathe. I feel like I tell that to people all the time. It's like, don't be afraid of it. Just take a deep breath, and, it may not come right away. And I have always connected to spirit boards, mainly because language is my primary use of creativity. I write, I enjoy art, but primarily writing. And so for me, it was just the next best thing as far as, my abilities would progress is by using the board. It's got the letters on it. And I've seen so many different artistic versions of the Ouija board as well. But before I get too sidetracked, again, I could talk about this forever. I find that, if you're going to be using the board for the very first time, ensure that, you are, like I said, create a sacred space or an environment that you're going to be able to concentrate. I'm a big, I don't always do it for myself if it's just a quick, message that I'm looking for. Maybe I have a certain question. But if you're having longer sessions, I recommend actually writing down what you're getting from it. If you don't do that, sometimes it's easy to forget. I find that writing it down helps me realize I'm not crazy. A lot in the beginning was I wasn't sure that any of this was actually real. So when I started writing things down in my journal, I could actually go back to some of my old journals and look at some of the things that the board was predicting for me, or answers that I was seeking at that particular time. So, I mean, again, having a space to start out with is definitely key. I find that works for me, and it's not to sound controversial, but I find that having that mood, sacred space, set at a particular day and a time works better sometimes than creating a circle, to do it in, more of like religious type thing. I find that just being able to relax helps me get better messages. And I think that when you're able to do that, you can get to know it and it can get to know you a little bit as well. It almost becomes an extension of who you are if you have a guide that, I call it a guide, call it a friend. I have had a few friends over the years, mostly have been male. But I also attribute that to a lot of what I was going on in my life at the very first time that I started using that board. I always kind of felt like I needed some sort of guidance, and it picked up on that. And it wasn't anything negative. I was giving just as much back as it was giving to me. So, like I said, creating a sacred space. If you are into prayer and that's what you do, then I say by all means. But I've also known a lot of pagans that don't do any of that, and they're more just earthy people. And just by creating, like I said, the atmosphere, quiet music, kind of like you're romancing it a little bit. You just want to relax, take a deep breath, and don't be afraid of it. I think that's the worst thing, is if you are sitting down and you want to use the board, you get afraid. You can't really comprehend something if you're too nervous. If you're shaking, definitely don't do it. It's going to pick up on the fact that you're nervous, kind of like a dog, that might be meeting a stranger for the first time. You wouldn't really want to be around someone that was afraid to talk to you. It'd be kind of like, try it a couple of times and then you'd be very standoffish. One thing I do recommend doing, though, as far as the how to usage parts of this, is when you are using the board, don't ask to speak to loved ones that have passed on. I have found that if you try to do too much too quickly, it's almost like you're forcing someone to do something too quickly. If you just met someone and you're saying, oh, by the way, can you drive me up the street? First off, you're a stranger. I've never met you. You're asking for something, or, hey, can I have $50,000? Hey, wait a minute. You just met me. I find that just kind of letting it go to either yes or no, similar to, if you're using a pendulum, you're letting it sway back and forth. Just simply asking yes or no questions, I think, is the best way to kind of get going, so that it gets used to the energy that you're putting on it. Your energy is going to reflect like a mirror when you're using the board. And I think that that's another thing that I think that it's something that people need to be aware of, is like what you're putting out, you're getting back from that. And, people speak a lot about the, is it your subconscious that's moving it? Definitely, there's moments that I've questioned that. No, but to me, it's no different than if you're standing for a very long period of time. Eventually, you're going to start rocking back and forth just because of the weight of your body. It's the same thing if you're holding out your arm, with a pendulum for a really long time. It's probably going to start swaying back and forth because your arm's tired, if you're holding a certain way. But if you're really looking for the answer or the message, it will come. Just, like I said, relax. I think that things come to you a little bit easier once you're relaxed. Again, asking yes or no questions only, creating a sacred space. If you're going to have people in a room with you while you're using that spirit board, make sure that everyone that's in the room is aware of what you're bringing in. So like I said about the astrological signs, if you're more interested in that, I have actually found that when I have had a board, it's usually a fire sign. And I find that because I'm a Libra, my first board that I ever used was an Aries, and I find that it's like opposites attract. But because they're more fiery and I'm not so fiery, there's kind of a give and a take, and kind of an encouragement for me when I was asking questions or understanding. For me, I felt that our chemistry was better. I'm not saying it's necessarily a male versus a female type chemistry, but just in general, it's kind of like the opposite attract type of thing. So I don't know if anyone has any questions before I keep going. I don't want to keep rambling.
Kelly, do you consider Ouija boards or spirit boards in the same realm as angel boards? I know people get probably upset about that, but it's the same concept. It's the same idea. Some people aren't comfortable with the spirit board, but they're comfortable with what they think is an angel board. Right. We're connecting to the same energy.
There's no difference for me. It's a difference of art, the art that you put into it, which is why I love making boards. I'm an artist type person first, and I think that with my abilities to do what I do, I feel like it's an extension of my art, because I can create art that people like, and then it doesn't seem so scary either. And I'm not someone that's trying to force someone, oh, you got to use this, you should try this, like it's, you know, some kind of weird drug or something. But I think that it makes it less threatening, and it's not what people think it is. It really isn't. Now, do I believe that there are some people that just naturally attract a lot of negativity? Yes. It doesn't necessarily mean it came from a board. It's an object. No different than, you know, a pair of headphones or a penny that you find on the street. It's an object. It's just a tool. And I think that there are some people that just are naturally, you know, they're conduits for that kind of stuff. You know, they're like lightning rods for negativity, even just in their everyday life. You know, if you look at some people they have all these negative things, you know, you watch TV and like those shows like A Haunting or something, you know, these people always have these really negative things happen to them. But then there are also people that have also had a lot of negativity in their personal lives outside of any of that. And so like can attract like, but also on a more positive way, you can also attract opposite. It's just a matter of how you treat it.
I also like the fact that you keep saying, be respectful.
Yes.
We say that about everything we do practically, but people, like you said, if they're making fun or they're joking, it's not going to be.
And you can create a sacred space mentally too. I found, you know, if I'm just having a quiet afternoon at home, I will pick up my board and I'll use it. This is probably going to sound weird, but you know, if I don't have anyone to talk to and I'm stressed out, I will vocalize my stress or say, oh my gosh, you know, I had the worst day today at work. And, you know, the board, I'm not asking questions, but I'll just say, you know, it just feels good to feel like I'm talking, you know, to someone that's listening, like a therapist almost. And I think that, again, that's part of that give and take. And it sounds crazy because most people, when they're thinking of a spirit board or a Ouija board, they're thinking, you know, that movie, The Witch Board, which I love that movie. I love horror movies, but again, that's just a horror movie. But I think that if you just look beyond that, I think that's where I'm trying to explain to people is it's not Hollywood. I think that you can become very creative. I think that it's inspired me to do what I do, which is write, you know, which is, you know, talk more about metaphysical subjects. 20 years ago, I never would have done this ever. It just wasn't who I was at the time. But they've also given me a lot of confidence. You know, it's like having a tribe behind me. And I think that that's why I still, even to this day, I get very emotional about the first time I ever used that Ouija board. You know, when that board just went right to yes, I bawled my eyes out in that moment because I was like, wow, this is the real deal, you know. And that board, he's downstairs. He's not with me right now. He has a special place. So,
I have a question for you, Kelly.
Yes.
The first time that you ever used a board, how did you discern where that information and energy was coming from?
I think with my situation, you could tell that it was more physical in that moment, if that makes sense, because I could feel you almost the first time you use something like that, when there's a lot of energy coming through, you can almost feel an electric charge. And that's how I could tell the difference. I knew it wasn't my subconscious. I feel it, like physically feel it, where I got the chills, my hand was like, and it moved right to yes so quickly that there was not even a question. And when I began getting the information, I'm going to explain something, and you guys who are mediums, empaths, are going to understand this. When I use my board now, I can use it very quickly, and I hear the responses before it spells it out. I can, similar to automatic writing. Without getting too far off topic, my Ouija board is actually the reason that I started doing automatic writing. So in a sense, it taught me how to do that because, again, language was how it was able to communicate with me and help me open my abilities, which at the time I didn't even realize I wanted those abilities like that. I was a huge fan of John Edwards, the medium. I used to watch his show all the time back 20 years. This is like 20 years ago when he was on all the time. And at the time, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I want to do this kind of thing myself. I just thought, wow, that would be really cool to meet someone that has that ability. And shortly before I ever used the Ouija board, I was actually very, very ill and fell and hit my head. It's just kind of funny, you know, when someone says, oh, you hit your head, now you have abilities, you must be crazy. You know? But I did. I got, I had the worst flu known to man, and I fell and I hit my bedroom door when I was walking back in, woke the whole house up. My dad, my mom ran out looking at me like, what in the world? But yeah. So I can keep going on and on forever about this subject, but I'm going to let you guys ask me some questions.
There's a question from the Facebook chat room from Chris. What do you think is the best way to help people overcome their fear of spirit boards, and can you even help them move past that fear?
I believe you can. I think it's something that can be taught. I have told people for years, if you are afraid of it, like good friends of mine, I'm like, don't be afraid of it. You know, I'll sit with them, I'll talk to them. But the best way to get over the fear is to just kind of talk to it like a friend. I know this sounds crazy, but if you are just mentally saying, hi, you know, I'm not here to be negative. I'm just here to inquire if this is working. You know, try, like I said, you know, try to think as positive as possible. You know, try to not dwell so much on that negative aspect, like, oh, this thing's going to possess me in the middle of the night. I'm going to see like the exorcist looking at me, you know, it's going to come, it's going to keep haunting me. I think that there are some people that have had negative experiences because they do test you. And that's how they know if you're, this sounds crazy again, but what I have found is that they will kind of test you with information even to see how far they can go. And if you're like, oh, that sounds crazy, then it's like, okay. Then they start giving you better information. Like I said, toddlers that want to test their parents or an adult, you know, they can run amok if you're not going, okay, you know, this is what we're here to do. We're here to ask some questions. And then you can also put a time limit. So if you're afraid to do it, maybe you only do it for 5 minutes. And then when that 5 minutes is over, you know, you put it away and then maybe just kind of rethink, okay, what did I learn here? Right. Like I said before, write down what you're asking. Did you get a response? Did it move? And I think that if you look at it more from a scientific perspective also, because I'm big into science also, which is very backwards doing what I do with this stuff sometimes. But if you have, you know, if you're working on it, write it down, make sure that you are, you know, asking good questions, something easy. Start with something easy. Like I said, yes or no questions. Don't try to have things spelled out to you. It's not going to happen right away. I can promise you, you're not going to spell out who's behind me like in the movies and, oh, dad who died 2 days ago is behind you. That's not going to happen. You know, just start with something that is simple. You know, am I going to get to work on time tomorrow? You know, something easy that, you know, can be answered, and or something just frivolous, you know, ask something frivolous, you know, but, you know, maybe it's not frivolous, but maybe it's a little bit more meaningful, but it's something that's simple so that it will take your mind off the fear as well, if that makes sense.
Do you do any kind of protection before you start working with the board?
I create, like I said, I do more of a sacred space thing. I do, for years and years, I always wore a cross when I used my board. But then I kind of gravitated away from that. I realized that it's, for me personally, it doesn't matter. I'm still mentally creating a space for myself. And so when I use my board, I'm a music person, huge music person, like no matter what it is, it relaxes me. I can put on any kind of music in the background, light some candles, maybe some incense. And that to me is in a sense, like I'm saying a prayer. It's more like, okay, take a deep breath, you know, out with the negative, you know, when you're breathing and your deep breaths, kind of like a meditation. But I would say it's more inward than physical. Like I'm not doing ceremonies to do that for me personally.
Yeah. Well, for myself, whenever I work with anything, I'm always asking, like I have a little 3 or 4 line prayer that I say that is basically, I ask your blessings, guidance, and protection as we come together here to work in your name. And so I always have a declaration of protection and high energy, like when I start anything, because, we all hear these stories. I think that's why angel boards were created, is because of all those B movies out there that, weird shenanigans start happening, stuff shows up, and, it's an angel board is basically identical except for the artwork. I think you mentioned that. So,
yeah. And I think it's also how comfortable someone feels, if that's what that person needs, because like I said, not everyone has a religion that they're using for sacred prayer either. And I think that is the part where you want to make sure that you feel as comfortable as possible when you're doing anything like this, and not just a board, if you're using tarot cards or a pendulum, or, you're doing automatic writing, or, you're playing dominoes or something, but you're doing different types of readings, seashells, you want to make sure that you're as relaxed as possible, and that, there's a strength in relaxing. Nothing's going to mess with you if you are powerful enough to kind of relax and chill out. It's when you're high strung, anxiety, people that suffer from depression, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a great time to start using a Ouija board either, because, you want to be clear of thought in mind, get a massage, relax, take a hot bath or something. I'm a big advocate on sea salt baths, which Pat could tell you. I'm big into bathing off the negativity. And I think that, periodically I do go through a cleansing, though, to get back to kind of what you were asking, Malcolm. Maybe not necessarily directly before, but I do find myself every other day or so taking a nice sea salt bath, a cleansing ritual, cleansing the aura. And I even cleanse my boards. When I bought a new board on Friday, because they have these new collector boards out from Hasbro, and I did sage it just because, people in the store, their energy, they might have picked it up and that kind of thing. I do believe I actually sage, and I actually will leave my boards on sea salt for a very long period of time, so that, it cleanses it through and through, just because people's energy.
Yeah. You don't know what it picks up. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. And so
Kelly, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to ask Kelly, is there like a proper way that you open, proper way that you close when you're finished?
It's like I said, mine is more mental. I do always say goodbye. I always do feel like I need to say hello, and then I always need to say goodbye, because mentally it's over. It's finished at that point. The door has shut. It's like visiting a friend that you've been seeing in a really long time. You have a great conversation. At the end of the night, we all say goodbye, give each other our hugs, and then we leave. I've had these moments in my life when I've been, just upset about something, and I'll have a session with my board, and at the end of it, I've actually picked up my board and hugged it. I'm a weirdo, I'm sorry, but I was like, oh gosh, thank you for giving me the message, goodbye, put it away. So I think that, just like I said before, the positive way that you treat something. But yes, definitely always hello and always goodbye. So that is probably the main ritual that I do use, even if it's not, like I said, creating a big circle. I'm more of a private practitioner, but I don't always draw a circle for everything. I don't do that for everything. And I don't always do it for that. Sometimes it's just an open communication that I have.
We've reached a halfway point in our show already this evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few-minute break as a short interlude. And when we come back, we'll continue talking with Kelly Hurst and find out more about the Spirit Board. We'll be right back. coming back to the show. This evening is the back to class evening, and it is with KB Hurst, and we're talking about spirit boards. And Pat was talking, we get into such spirited little discussions when we're on our short interlude. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Pat, but I'm like, hold on.
Yeah, you did. But tell them where the first board was made and the times, and Jared talking about the planchette with the pencil. And
well, I'd heard that the Ouija board was between the two, because they used to do table tipping, and they would do so many tips per letter, but it get kind of annoying if you get a lot of X, Y's, and Z's in your message, right? So then they came up with the planchette with a pen or pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Ouija board came out of that from, I think it was mostly coming out in North America, coming out of spiritualism. But I did end up a very long time ago around somebody's kitchen table, and they had an Indian Brahmin there. And he decided to ask some questions. So he just cleared the table. They wrote a couple things on, actually on the table itself, but a water glass upside down as the planchette.
Yeah.
And he was commanding. He always addressed the spirit as jinn. And, that's coming out of really straight up Hindu culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's definitely a tool that's been around for a lot of different cultures for a long time. I called a friend of mine today. He actually runs a place called ouijaboards.us, and he buys and sells Ouija boards. So I had a little chat with him earlier today just to get a little background info. So
That's cool.
I don't use a board or a planchette myself. We have done a lot of table tipping, which can get really fun if you have a lot of energy.
Yeah. Can only imagine that kind of energy, because I know how much I get when I'm using my board myself. It's a lot. It just flies. I've had it fly off my board.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
We were doing table tipping with one of those tin TV tables, and it was in a really old house. It was 1840s, and the ceiling was like 7 feet. And there was a very strong energy in the house and a very strong group, and the TV table got stuck on the ceiling.
Oh no!
It was just having fun with us, It was really crazy, and was dancing with different people, and oh yeah.
Who was having fun with who, Malcolm?
Exactly.
Oh, we had a great time.
Spirit was having a little fun with you all.
Oh yeah.
Finally, people.
I have one of probably the most obvious questions. Have you ever had, and tell me the difference. Some people call it a plenum, some people call it a planchette. But
I call it a planchette.
Have you ever had it move on its own without anyone touching it?
Not like that you would in a movie, no, but I definitely, there's times when I'm barely touching it and I can feel it sliding underneath while I'm gently guiding it. And that's the time that it flew off, was when I was using it and it was going very, very quickly, and I could have just let it slide for a second. It was like, shoo, and off it went, because it's the energy that does it, because your energy mixed in with that energy. And if you start off using the board where it's just you and someone, and then that board just is, say, like, for instance, Michael, you're using it with your wife or something, and you're both, when you first start using the board, you both are always the same two people that are using that board. That energy is like wildfire. I mean, it's amazing what the energy it feels like when you're using them. When you finally get to that point where you can actually do that. Because the first time you go to use it, it may not move at all. It might just sit there. I've had people go, these things don't work. I'm like, yeah, they do, but probably not something you should do then. If it never moves ever, then it's saying, I don't want to talk to you.
Now, Kelly, my friend Mary, that introduced me to all this, she will use the board, and she can tell, or I can tell when I'm with her and she's doing it, that the person or the entity that we're talking to will change. And sometimes it'll go off and say goodbye. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes a new one come in and they'll simply say hello. Do you find that also? I just found out. I thought it was just me. I could feel the shift in the energy. but they will
I
give her a physical sign.
I can feel a shift in the energy with other boards than the main one that I use. If I'm using that particular board, the one that I've used for 20 years, I don't sense a shift in energy usually. I have a couple of other ones that I use almost as much, and I will sense other male energy. I have a very docile type energy that comes in, that when I'm asking questions, if it's about finance, that's the energy that I want when I'm asking those questions. The board that I bought on Friday has a very female type energy attached to it. And it's the first female that I've had come through in probably 6 or 7 years. But for some reason, it's always men that come through. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. I'm not sexist or anything like that. It's just, I seem to gravitate more towards different entities for different things. And I'm not going to use the word spirit. Notice I'm very careful not to say spirit, because I don't necessarily think they're all spirits.
Right. So you answered my question. I didn't get to ask
Yes.
it. Do you find
Sorry.
boards attract different energies?
Yes.
You know. Okay.
There was actually one, I have one interesting story that's not necessarily a negative story, but it's definitely a weird story that I will share with you and our listeners. There was a time, I still to this day, I've always been very into like ufology, aliens, gray aliens, that kind of stuff. I love that stuff. But I remember one time asking my board, are grays real? Was aliens out there? Do they really look like this? And I recall to this, I still get chills thinking about this. I got the response, don't look for them. Don't ask about them. They're negative and they don't have souls. That's what I was told about that. And I left it. And I said, okay, I will not ask that question. And it was more in particular about that type of species. In pop culture, you see them all the time. But it was almost like having a dad come through and say, no, you're not asking that question. It's like, okay, don't ask about him. Yeah, don't put it out there.
On the stove. Don't put your hand on the stove.
Exactly. And it was just like, don't go there. And it was one of my very first experiences. And I think that's why I've always felt comfortable with that type of communication, because I always felt like I had some kind of protection, whether it was mine or someone else's. It was definitely more of a guide or an angel. And I wouldn't necessarily say that they're always angels. They can be kind of naughty. They can tell you things you don't need to know about people. Like you have a friend down the street. I don't need to know about that. But it's, they come through sometimes. I always call it drunk spirits, when they come through and they come in and they tell you things that you really don't need to know. But I think we've all had at least one of those experiences. Those of us on the panel have had probably strange experiences like that. I was like, well, I was not expecting that. Didn't need that, but okay. But I try to be as serious as possible, with it. I mean, every now and then I'll make a joke like, what are you wearing today? Kind of jokingly. It's just because I'm using a board all the time. It's not like I see this entity talking to me like a human being. But I find it's just, when you're using a spirit board, don't watch a horror movie beforehand. Don't create the negative energy before you even go there. Like I said, like Pat has said, like Jared has said, be respectful. And I don't just mean in, being nice or calm and not saying anything, just don't turn your nose down at it either. If you really want to use it, then admit it, use it, but don't go, this is stupid. Like, why? Then why are you using it? Why even try it? You're not going to have a positive experience when you're like that. So don't get drunk and do it at a party.
Okay, I was going to say, do you also find that it's better not to have been drinking, not to have been doing substances or something? Because I feel like whatever our attitude is when we start, if we're respectful and we ask to speak only to the highest and best of light, that's what we'll get. But if you just start messing around and say, y'all come, then you're going to get everything and everybody. Right. Okay.
It has been my experience that I don't have the best responses if I have had more than 2 glasses of wine on the, and I'm just like sitting there with a friend and we're chatting. I'm like, oh, let's do, stupidly. I find that it's not so much that I'm getting something negative. It's just I'm not understanding the response is not as is. It's not that it's negative or positive. It's just it's too quick. You don't understand what's being said. You have too many things going on in your head, so you're not going to get that response, or you're not going to get the answer to your question. So
Not as
I don't
focused.
usually do that.
Not as focused.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. That's the word. I feel like I need to focus. But yeah. So good question, Pat.
Michael, examples of her boards.
Go right ahead. I'll pull the first one up for you. It's your doctor board?
Oh yes. So a lot of people will make they go get tattoos when something meaningful happens to them. I have a gentleman who has narrated a lot of my horror stories. His moniker is called Dr. Creepin, and so I made a spirit board of his little likeness with books on it of all the stories that he's narrated, not just of mine, but of others that I liked that he narrated. And so I put this board together. It's actually half finished because I still need to put another layer of poly on it. And I'm trying to find a good box to put it in to keep it. So I have that one for that purpose. That's why I made it, as a tribute to that. It's kind of like it's like a different thing going on in my life with my other world, which is my writing. So
Yeah, you invest your energy in it.
yes.
You also did one with The Crow?
Yes, it's one of my all-time favorite movies, The Crow. And so I made a board with a crow planchette made out of glass. I had a little bit of help with the planchette, but it was all my design. I made the board. It took me, I think, 3 weeks to make that board just because of all the poly I had to put on top of it.
Really cool.
So,
It's interesting the way that you created the planchette.
Mm-hmm.
Why so many crisscross? I know wings and feathers and things like that, but
the original prototype was made out of wood, and I had a jigsaw, but I wanted it to be very defined, and I wanted the wings to come off of the board when it was flying around the board, because mine moves so quickly. So, it's kind of got this motion that goes like this, and that's it looks really cool when you use it. So I don't use that one that often just because it's a very nice board. So
you have. Go ahead.
It almost looks like stained glass, is it, or no?
it's glass. I had a friend of mine put it together for me, but I told her what I wanted, and so she soldered it together.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The next one that I'm going to show, it's busy. It has a bee plenum, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, this is one busy board.
It was made for a friend of mine is an artist, and she's an art teacher in Florida, and she knows a lot about keeping bees. So I made the planchette out of clay and shaped the bee, and the glass is the center of the bee's stomach. And I attached these foil pieces to the back of it to look like the wings, and I painted it gold. And then the actual board itself, we're both really big, huge music fans, love Tori Amos, some of those people. And so I did a whole collage Ouija board because she likes magnetic words on her fridge. So I kind of did a board that looks like her refrigerator. And when I gave it to her, she cried. I was like, "You didn't think it was funny?" And she's like, "It's so pretty." And I'm like, "But I just, okay."
Yeah.
But yeah.
The last one that you have, it looks more like cards on the board. Is this an actual large table?
It's actually a tarot table that is minded after a lot of the boards that I've made. And I made it for a friend so that when he's doing tarot readings, he can use the different alchemy symbols that were on the table. And I hand painted all of that myself. I didn't use anything to measure it out. I didn't use a picture. I just hand painted it. And I gave that to him as a Christmas gift.
That's cool.
I give a lot of my boards away as gifts. I don't usually sell them necessarily all the time because of the energy that I'm putting into it from my own board. In a sense, it's like an extension of my board when I make them.
going back to some question and answer, there's a gentleman by the name of Dave, and he asks you, can you use other tools rather than a Ouija board? He said, you said that just like anything else, what makes it so special then?
For me personally, it is, like I said, I connect to them because of language. My art is mainly writing language. So for me, it connects more for me, but for you, it might be a pen and a piece of paper, and you might just use automatic writing, or, ask if you can just start writing out things, maybe you have a yes and a no written on a piece of paper, and maybe you take your pen and you circle that yes when there's an answer that is a yes, and maybe you circle it with a no. It can be broke down into very simplistic methods. But I find that because the letters on the board, I love language, I love writing. So for me, that's how I connect. That's what I use.
I'll ask another question just really quick. How do you feel about the classic Ouija board that was put out as a game?
I love the design, just because it has a lot of background attributed to it. The fact that they put it out as a game was a great way to sell a lot of them. It was a business tactic to sell to a lot of people, especially children. It was really a money-making thing. I don't like the idea of it being sold as a game, but funny side note, the first board that I ever got, when I first started using it, when I was staying with my sister for a month in Florida, my niece, who actually wanted me to play with the board, by the end of the trip, I was using it so much, and I remember saying something like, well, I'll have to say goodbye to this board. And I remember it spelling out N-O. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to bed now and got to go to the airport tomorrow. The very next day, my niece comes over to me with the box, and she says to me, and I've told her this story so many times and she laughs at me, but she came over to me and she said, I decided that I don't think this board is mine anymore. I think this is your board, and I think you should take it home. And I said, all right, we're going on an airplane. Let's go. So
now, to differentiate, this would be a classic setup for a Hollywood movie, to where you said, no, the board stays with you,
right?
And all hell breaks loose with the little girl. Have you or any of the other people seen or experienced anything like that?
Like that? No. I have had where I would say I have been, in a sense, tested with information. I've been told to get off a board before, and I knew then that it wasn't something I needed to be doing in that moment. Again, I look at that as more like a warning, not like, ooh, I'm coming to get you, but it could just be that something else was present at the time. And so my main spirit guide was being protective and just saying, hey, not now, use it later. But that's been 20 years ago. And I can remember, I realize we're getting close to the hour, but the first time that I started using my board, I will be completely honest, I wasn't possessed by anything, but I was definitely obsessed. And there's a difference, because I spent hours and hours and hours on this thing, like just trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And it was almost to the point where I would spend probably 4 or 5 hours in the evening on my board when my parents would go to bed. I was in my room with the door locked all hours of the night. I would probably sleep 3 hours at the time, and finally got to the point where I remember using my board, and my board spelled out, go eat, go outside. And it was just like, oh, you don't want to hang out with me anymore. Just get out. And people would never, like, you guys understand, you have strange things that happen, but I've always had this connection, I guess. And I guess that's probably why it's so special to me. Another person that asked that in the live questionnaire, but I think that it's just, I truly do love them. I really do, because I think, without going too much into detail and going off on a tangent, I had a lot of good experiences, and I was taught a lot of lessons. I could do a whole other episode just talking about my awakening with using the board and how it helped me become better at what I do as far as my own abilities.
To me, it's your form of meditation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because some of us have to get quiet and just sit and just wait for the message. And you need the visual and the physical using the board. She made me a beautiful board. And my planchette is a dragon. And it is beautiful. It's green. It's beautiful. Very few people see it, touch it, because they always want to pick it up and play with it. And I'm scared that somebody's going to drop it and break it. I'd have to kill them then, you know. Or I'd be calling Kelly crying, you got to fix this. He's in 50 pieces, but you can fix him.
2 words, Pat. Hot glue. I'm kidding.
I'm not going to go there. We all have our different tools, and we all have different ways pretty much to get to the same areas, you know, and it's absolutely fascinating. And it's just like, to me, it's just like crystals. We don't necessarily choose the modality that we're going to use. It kind of chooses us. And then it just keeps at you until you say, okay, I will try this. I will, you know.
Definitely. That's basically what happened when I started using the Ouija board, and it's amazing the things that I have learned over the years. I remember doing automatic writing for the first time and thinking I was possessed because I didn't understand why I was able to do that, and it was just because I wasn't around a Ouija board at the time. I wanted to use the board to ask a question. I didn't have it, so I used a pen. Next thing I know, I'm writing 6 pages of stuff that I'm like, what? And that was the whole point of me not being able to find the board.
I don't know if you remember ever read any of Ruth Montgomery's books, but she was a writer for, I believe, the Washington Post in the 50s. And she didn't know she was doing automatic writing. She's sitting at the typewriter and she thinks she's typing a story. And then when she goes back to read it, it was something entirely different. And they turned into many, many books. And then when she got a computer, it was the same thing. And it's just very interesting. I think spirit kind of, or the universe kind of directs us in what direction we're going to go. And once you're open to it, there's no shutting it down. It just is there, and it's not going to go away. And the more you ignore it, the more it's going to keep coming back and saying, I'm here, pay attention.
Definitely.
Jared's laughing at me. He wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Jared?
No.
Nor Malcolm, nor Michael. If anyone would have told us, I've only been doing this publicly about 40 years. If anybody would have told us 45 years ago or 30 years ago or 20 years ago, depending on your age, that you'd be doing this publicly, you'd be going, oh, no. I mean, no way, Jose. I'm doing this, but nobody's going to know I'm doing this.
It wasn't never a thought in my head that I would have never thought 20 years ago that I would be making wooded Ouija boards, spirit boards.
Yeah, because you were just playing with them when I first met you. You hadn't really gotten into making them. You were just beginning to think.
No, I wasn't. I had made one before I met you, and I think it was the crow board. And then after that, I started getting into them a lot more as far as the art end of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love them. I love the art. So.
They're your children. They're really,
they are.
Such love and such feeling goes into it and such energy. Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm going to take it that that's going to be a natural pause for our evening.
I was waiting for another question.
Yeah.
Oh, there's all the people that would have all the theological questions or all the Hollywood questions, and I know that a lot of people are actually sitting back, listening, paying attention, and learning something that they did not know beforehand, which to me is awesome. Because I'm definitely one of the people that would sit and go, okay, now, let's talk reality and just how evil is this thing, when in fact it is not.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one thing that I would remind other people, whether they're watching or listening to the podcast. A Ouija board, a spirit board, is nothing more than a tool, as everyone has said, and it is the intent of the person using the tool that will direct the outcome of what happens.
Yeah.
So if
I always
you-
joke that they want some people to be afraid of it, because if everyone was that smart to use it, then they'd really have to talk, and they get tired and want to talk.
it would be interesting if there
Teasing.
was a lot of people that picked it up and started to use it. The world would be a very interesting place. Well, Kelly, I appreciate you taking time this evening to give us a one-on-one with Spirit Boards. And for Pat, Malcolm, Jared, thank you for being here this evening. For all the people that are watching, please join us again next week. We're going to be reading for public people next week. So bring your questions into the chat room. We're going to have an awesome kind of evening. And then don't forget, again, coming up on the 30th, we'll be doing a live seance with Reverend Pat Beers on the 30th. And that's going to be a very interesting evening. There's no doubt about it. So until next week, for everybody that is watching or listening on the podcast, if you need more information, please visit us at www.terraturas.com. You can visit us on Facebook at /Terra Turas. You can check out all of our past episodes, either on Facebook or on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is Terra Turas. And make sure you check for our podcasts. They are all on most of the major podcast items. Again, just look for us, Terra Turas, and you'll be able to catch all of our past shows. Until next week, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye,
evening.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.